We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Hey and Aleph Meseches Beitzah. This is Beitzah Daf 35a. The Gemara here asks, "V'halo mosro choser." When the person takes from the storehouse some food, isn't he going to return whatever is extra, whatever is remaining? Rashi over here explains, "V'halo mosro choser." The Gemara in the previous Talmud had suggested that the reason why it's kovei l'maiser, let's say a person goes to a storehouse and says, let's say it's Erev Shabbos, they say, tomorrow I'm going to eat from this particular area. So we said that it's chayiv in maisers because the very fact that you designated it, that you said you're going to eat it, makes a kviyas and says it's chayiv in maiser. But how could you say that? Let's say it would be a weekday and you would take a lot of tevel. And he'd put it in front of him and say he wants to eat it. Now it looks like a real kviyas. It doesn't just look like a snack. It looks like he's going to eat a lot like a meal. But the halacha is if it's something that you could put back into the pile after you eat, from the place you took it. So Hashamina Leilu Rebbe Eliezer, we have seen that Rebbe Eliezer holds the Amar Lo Kava Benatila Kamaisa. He says that's not considered a kviyas. Now that's if you actually physically take it. Certainly if you simply say that you're going to take it, that's not going to be a kviyas, as we're about to quote. V'shamina leilu Rebbe Eliezer. The Gemara continues. We know that Rebbe Eliezer holds the Amar Kol Heicha Demosro Choser Lo Kava. He says any time that you're able to put back the extra, so it's not considered a kviyas. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Maisrus. Hanotel Zeisim in Hamatan. Let's say someone takes olives from the vat. Tovel achas b'melach v'yochel. So he can dip one at a time in salt and eat. V'im tovel v'nosan l'fanav asara. Now let's say he puts in front of himself 10 of them. So then chayiv, meaning he does a lot. So then he's chayiv. That's considered a kviyas. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, and then the Mishnah continues. Rabbi Eliezer says, min hamaton tahor chayiv. If the vat that you took from is tahor, then you're actually chayiv. In other words, then it's a kviyas, because then you can't put it back. Min hamatan tame, but if it's a matan that is tame, so potter, then he's going to be potter. Because whatever is extra, he's going to put back anyway, and so therefore that's not going to be a kviyas. And the Gemara explains this. But we asked on that Mishnah in Maisrus, Maishna Reisho, Maishna Seifa. What's the difference in the ratio where it's tahor, and what's the difference in the Seifa where it's tame? Why is it that if the vat is tame, suddenly you can return the extra? V'yomer Rabbi Yavo explained the Reisha b'matan tahor v'gavra tame. The case of it is as follows. In the Reisha, the vat is tahor and the person is tame. So the lo matzi mahadirle, you can't return the extra because you're not going to put the tame items back into the tahor matan. Seifa b'matan tame v'gavra tame. The Seifa is talking about where the vat is tame and the person is tame. The matzi mahadirle, that you're able to return it. So again, you see from this that if you're able to return the moser, so then it's not considered a kviyas. So in our case as well, of course, it should not be considered a kviyas. And so the Gemara answers, no, Masnisa Nami, our Mishnah also is talking about the same case, but Muksa Tahor V'Gavra Tame. It's talking about a situation where the storage area is Tahor and the person is Tame. The Lo Matzi Mahadirle, he's not able to return it, and therefore it is going to be a situation where there is a kviyas. But the Gemara continues, Valo Muchzar V'Omden. How could you even give this answer? In this case, you never physically took it at all. It was already there. You're just designating it with Dibur Bialma, just with speech, as Rashi over here says. Valo Muchzar V'Omden, Valo Lo Natzlan. He never took it in this case of the Mishnah. Ela Dibur Bialma. He goes on Friday and he designates. He says, I'm going to take from this storage area. Now, if you're saying that in a case where he actually physically took it and he's just able in theory to return it, so in such a situation it's not considered a kviyas, it's not chayiv in maisrus. So kilo efshar bechazar nami velo natzlan elo dibura bi'alma. But if you have a case, let's say you can't return it if you physically took it because you're tame and the area where it's stored is tar, but you didn't actually take it anyway. It was just a dibur. You just designated it. So ein lo chazara kazu. There's nothing more like a chazara than that. The fact that you didn't even physically take it yet, so it's already returned. The afilu mishkol nami lo shaklinu. He never even took it yet. So in that case, it should be considered like a situation where he's able to return it. And again, it should not be a kviyas. Just the dibur bialma should not make it chayiv in maisrus. And so the Gemara answers, El Omer Rav Simi Barashi. Rather, Rav Simi Barashi answers, Rebbe Eliezer Ka'amrit. Are you trying to bring a proof from Rabbi Eliezer? Rashi's going to explain this. Rabbi Eliezer l'taime. Rabbi Eliezer goes according to his reasoning. He's a das yochid. The Omar Truma kava, because he even says that Truma can be koveya, v'kol shekein Shabbos, and certainly Shabbos can be koveya. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Peiros et Tarmon. Let's say you have a situation of Peiros where you took off Truma, ad shelo nigmar malachton, before there was a gemar malacha. Rabbi Eliezer oser lechol mehan arai. Rabbi Eliezer says in such a situation, you cannot eat from it in an arai manner as a snack. The Chachamim matir, and the Chachamim say that it's mutter. Rashi over here explains, Elamer Rav Simi Barashi, Elalio lam Shabbos hu dekava b'masnisin. The Gemara is going back to what it said in the previous Amud. Rather, the explanation of our Mishnah is that the fact that it's Shabbos, you were designating the food to eat it on Shabbos, it wasn't the designation that makes it a kaviyas, it's Shabbos. And that's what's going on in the Mishnah. But the problem was the Gemara had asked, is Shabbos koveya? We should bring a proof from the Mishnah. But still, it's not a proof to Mar Zutra's position. Again, they were trying to bring a proof from the Mishnah that Shabbos is koveya, but it's not a proof. Why? Because it's the opinion only of Adas Yachid, Rebbe Lozer. Rebbe Lozer ka'amrit. That's Rebbe Lozer. Minei ma'isa siyata de Shabbos kava af b'shalo nigmar malachtan. You're trying to bring a proof from Rebbe Lozer's opinion that Shabbos is koveya even in a situation where the product is not finished, where the food has not had a gemar malacha. Rebbe Lozer l'taimer. Rebbe Lozer is a das yachid according to his own reasoning. Diamar truma kovas. Rebbe Lozer holds even that truma is koveya, meaning davar shalo nigmar malachto. If you have something which did not have a gemar malacha, again, it was not a finished product. Shem higbia trumaso neser lachila sarai. He happens to hold that if you took off truma, you're not allowed to eat it as a snack at that point in time. Until you separate other maestros. In other words, he has a unique opinion that even the separation of truma is koveya achiyah for meiser. The kol sheka in Shabbos, certainly Shabbos, according to Rabbi Eliezer, would be koveya. The chashiva achilasa, that's considered a chashiv achila. Avol rabbanan, but in terms of the opinion of the rabbanan, Eimelach, I can say to you, kihechi, the pligi v'truma, pligi v'Shabbos. Just like they would argue with Rabbi Eliezer on truma, they would also argue on Shabbos, and that's why it wasn't a proof from the Mishnah. In other words, the Mishnah is saying that Shabbos is koveya, but that's only according to the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. We want to prove what would the halacha be according to the opinion of the rabbanan. The Gemara continues, Tashma Miseifa, but still we could bring a proof from our Mishnah from the end of the Mishnah, because the Chachamim argue on Rabbi Eliezer, but they don't argue on that particular point. The Chachamim say, it says over there in the Mishnah, V'Chachamim omer at sheyirshom, v'yomer mikan v'yad kan. It says that the Chachamim say, you can't just say, I'm going to take from this storage house. You have to identify exactly, make a siman, exactly what you're going to take. And if you do that, then you're allowed to eat it on Shabbos, otherwise you can't. And so now the Gemara makes the same diuk. Talmud erev Shabbos b'shvius. The only reason that's permitted, if you identify exactly what you're going to eat, that you're allowed to eat it on Shabbos, is because it happens to be, we're talking about a case in the Shemitah year. The Lav Bari Surehu, there's no problem, you don't have to take off Maisers in the Shemitah year. Ha b'shar shnei shavua, but apparently in other years where it's not the Shemitah year, Divnei Surei Ninu, where you would have to take off Maiser. So Asurim, apparently, even the Chacham would say, even if you designate the exact food, it's going to be a problem because you have to take off Maisers. You can't eat it on Shabbos. My time, and what's the reason according to the Chachamim? Lav Mishum, the Shabbos cover, it's the same thing. Aren't the Chacham also agreeing that Shabbos is koveya for Maisers? So the Gemara says, Lo, no, Shani Osam, it's different over there in the Mishnah. Kevan Domer Mikan Viad Kan Ani Ochel. Since in this case the Chacham are saying you're not just designated from the storage house, you're saying exactly what you're going to be eating Lamachar the next day, so Kavale. So that creates a Kvias. If you identify specifically exactly what you're going to eat, that's going to create the Kvias according to the Rabbanan. It has nothing to do with the fact that Shabbos is koveya. So the Gemara asks the same question they asked in the previous Amud. Ihachi, if so, my irya Shabbos. So why does the Mishnah have to talk about a case of Shabbos? Afilu b'chol nami. Just give a case on a weekday. In other words, if the issue over here has nothing to do with Shabbos, because it's not an issue of Shabbos being koveya, so just give us this chiddush on a weekday to tell us this chiddush, that if you designate exactly what you're going to eat, it's going to be koveya. So the Gemara says, no, there's a separate chiddush regarding Shabbos, the same answer as before. Hakamash malon, the Mishnah wants to teach us the tevel muchan hu etzel Shabbos. We want to say that even though this item is tevel, and it's chayiv in Maisers, that would not prevent it in terms of hachana. It would still be considered muchan for Shabbos. It would not be muksa. Why? Shem avar v'tikno mesukan, because in theory, if the person transgresses and takes off Maiser, even though you're not supposed to separate Maiser on Shabbos, but if you do separate Maiser on Shabbos, that would be effective, and therefore there's no problem muksa. That's what the Mishnah is saying over here. There may be other problems with doing this, but there's not going to be a problem of muksa. And Rashi over here explains, Tashvami Seifa Delo Ifla Rabbanan, that the Rabbanan, they only argue in Rebbe Eliezer, Ela Inyan Breira, they argue about Breira. Can you say retroactively that what you decide to eat is that what you designated all along? Avol module the dafka erev Shabbos b'shvius habishar shnei shavua aser misham meiser. They admit to what Rebbe Eliezer says, that you can only do this in a Shemitah year, but if you do it in other years, it's going to be a problem because there's a chiyuv of meiser and you can't separate meiser on Shabbos. And so the Gemara says, no, we're teaching it on Shabbos, the tevel muchanu kideforishas, like I explained earlier. Rashi says, Rashi explained on the previous Amud that we're trying to teach that the problem that the Rabbanan had has nothing to do with the fact that it's muchan. Tevel is muchan on Shabbos. That issue of muksa is not an issue. And Rashi continues, V'hachalo matzi lemifrach v'arei mosra choser. Now over here, the Gemara can't ask the same question they asked before. The question they asked before in Rebbe Elazar was, but 1 second over here, aren't you able to return whatever you don't eat? And therefore, since you could return whatever you don't eat, the designation shouldn't make it chayiv and meiser. That they can't ask over here, Kedeparach la'el, alibad Rebbe Elazar, like they asked before according to Rebbe Elazar, mishum de Rabbanan, because that's only a good question in Rebbe Elazar. But according to the Rabbanan, Shamina Lu, we already know that they hold, the afilu mosra choser, that even in a situation where you're going to return the extra, the chay lo ala kaviyusa, still it's going to be koveya in terms of meiser. Hilgach igla misli tamayid Rabbanan masnisa nami mishum di'iu kave velo mishum Shabbos. Therefore, it could be according to the Rabbanan, the reason why there's a kaviyus for meiser in the case of the Mishnah has nothing to do with Shabbos. It could be because of the designation. And the Gemara continues, Uramini, we have the following contradiction. This is going to be a contradiction within Rabbi Eliezer. It says in the Mishnah in Trumos, let's say a person is eating a cluster of grapes, v'nichnas migino l'chotzer, and then he takes it from the garden into the chotzer. Now, normally, a cluster of grapes, you're not chayav to take off meisers because it's not considered a finished product, because you're usually going to turn it into wine. But over here, the question is, you brought it into the chotzer, maybe the chotzer should be koveya, even though it's not a finished product, and it should be chayav in meisers. So the Mishnah says it's a machlokas tanoim. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yigmor, Rabbi Eliezer says the person can finish eating because the chotzer is not koveyat, it's not chayiv in meiser. Rabbi Yoshua Omer Lo Yigmor, Rabbi Yoshua says no, he can't finish eating. The chotzer is koveya, it's no longer considered a snack, and therefore it's going to be a problem to eat it if you don't take off meiser. And the Mishnah continues, Choshcha b'leilei Shabbos. Now let's say Shabbos comes. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yigmor. Rabbi Eliezer again says he can finish eating it. Rabbi Yoshua Omer Lo Yigmor. Rabbi Yoshua says he cannot finish eating it. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer seems to be saying he can finish eating it because Shabbos is not kovei l'maiser. That's a contradiction to what we said in Rabbi Eliezer before. We said that according to Rabbi Eliezer, Truma and Shabbos are kovei for maiser. And so the Gemara answers Hasam over there in that Mishnah Kidakatani time. It's like the reason is given. Rabbi Nosson Omer, Rabbi Nosson says, Lo kisham Rabbi Elazar Yigmor b'chotzer Yigmor. When Rabbi Elazar says that he can finish eating, he doesn't mean to say that you finish eating the grapes in the chotzer. Elayotze chutz l'chotzer v'yigmor. It means you have to leave the chotzer and finish eating. V'lo kisham Rabbi Elazar Yigmor b'Shabbos Yigmor. And when Rabbi Elazar says he finishes eating, he doesn't mean to say on Shabbos he can finish eating the grapes. Elamamtin l'matzai Shabbos v'yigmor. What it means is, Rabbi Eliezer means that he waits until Matzai Shabbos and then he can finish eating the grapes. In other words, according to Rabbi Elazar in this Mishnah as well, Shabbos is koveya. It would be a problem to eat it on Shabbos because it would be chayiv and meiser. Rabbi Eliezer was only saying that you're allowed to wait until Matzai Shabbos and then you could eat it. And the Gemara continues, Ki also Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Echad Shabbos, v'echad Truma, v'echad Chotzer, v'echad Mekach. Whether you're talking about Shabbos, whether you're talking about taking off Truma, whether you're talking about bringing it into the Chotzer, whether you're talking about a situation where you're selling the item, Kulon ein Kovin. All of those things are not Koveya. They don't create a Chiyuv of Meiser, Ela b'davar shenigmar malachtan, unless you're talking about a food that is a finished product. And so therefore you see again, when it comes to Shabbos over here, if it doesn't have a Gemar Malacha, it's not going to be Koveya. And the Gemara explains, Shabbos, when Rabbi Yochanan says Shabbos is not Koveya la'afuke mid Hillel, that means to exclude Hillel's position. The Tanya, because we learned in a Beitzah, Hama'amer Peiros mimakom l'makom. Let's say somebody gathers fruits from one place to another, and the Gemara changes this to l'ktzios. In other words, you're doing it to create dried out fruits. There's no Gemar Malacha yet. V'kidesh alein ayom, and then Shabbos comes. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Hillel liatzmo oser. Hillel is the only one who says that it would be usher in such a situation. In other words, Hillel is a das yachid that says that there's a kviyas, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis.